Good morning, Isolation Nation. How are we all doing? It's week 3 of isolation, and I hope you're all doing well inside your bubbles. I'm very excited today to introduce to you all a ex-semi-pro snowboarder, a university business information systems lecturer, and also sports fanatic, Lena Waizenegger. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Jason. How are you doing?
Very good. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm sure that we have quite a range of topics to cover today, so we'll try and get through most of them. I know you have like a almost infinite knowledge around information systems. Just before we jump into it, for my mum, dad, and cousins who are watching, can you just give a quick five of what you're all about and how you came to be here?
Oh, okay, cool. So you might have probably noticed I'm not a Kiwi. I'm German originally, so I grew up in Germany, and then I went studying in Innsbruck, where I could pursue all my snowboarding, but I could also study international business and economics. And then I went, so I did study in Innsbruck and in Grenoble in France. It was kind of like a dual study. And after my studies, I went up to northern Germany to work in a consultancy. And after that, I decided I want to go back to university and pursue my PhD, which I then did. So I came back to Innsbruck, where I started my PhD for 2 years, and then I received a scholarship from the Austrian ministry, which then allowed me to come to New Zealand. So I think I came to New Zealand in 2015. So then I started working at the University of Auckland and still continued with my PhD, which I then completed in 2017. And then I was lucky enough to get a job as a lecturer at AUT beginning of 2018. So, and this is where we are now.
Sweet. And also you were a semi-pro snowboarder. That's cool as well. Talk about that. How are those days?
Yeah, that was kind of my past life. No, I still really love snowboarding, and I'm still doing it actively. But yeah, I did sports my whole life. Like I pretty much started. I used to compete in swimming as well. So I started swimming when I was 5 and was pretty much in the pool for 5 or 6 times a week. And I did heaps of other sports like horse riding, gymnastics, beach volleyball, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it's very exciting. A bit of an adrenaline junkie. It's pretty cool.
Still am.
That's good. Let's start on a light note. What's been your favorite part of this whole isolation situation, and then we'll go into the heavy business side?
What was my favorite part?
Yeah. What's been a positive about the being in isolation, or being how the world has changed?
Yeah.
For you, personally.
So I mean, of course, it's a big challenge, right? Like for all of us, pretty much. But on the other side, it's also a great opportunity because everyone has the chance to kind of reinvent themselves. Like it's like a new environment, new settings, new work routine, new leisure time routine, right? So I think it was quite interesting also to see, how everyone kind of deals with the challenge, and then either kind of tries to cope with it in some way or really uses it as an opportunity. And we're also studying that in our research project at the moment. So I'm just running a research project how people leverage technology during the lockdown period. And it's really interesting to see and hear all the stories, like, what people come up with, how they manage their daily challenges, but also, really how they see new opportunities. So it's an amazing research project so far.
Just from what you're seeing in that project, has it mainly been positive? How people are adapting, or is it quite hard for most people that you've talked to?
Really both. Like, we hear a lot of struggles. Also like, being like socially isolated because, you know, like, I mean, we're social beings, right? So, and now being like either alone in the bubble or just with a few people, that is quite hard for us, you know, just because we are like social in nature. And then also finding like a new work routine, right? Like, so because now we have complete work-life boundaries, right? Or complete work-leisure time boundaries, or blurred boundaries. So now it is really hard to kind of switch off as well and find, okay, this is my dedicated work time, and this is now where I do leisure activities. So usually, right, if you go into an office, you always have that geographical distance, right? So you have that commute where you then switch from your work context to your private context. And now, because it's all blurred, you don't have that, you know,
separation,
like, change of mind anymore. Yeah. So, but then also, you know, a lot of positive sides, right? So people are really surprised and amazed how, you know, you can actually transfer the social contact, like at your work, into, you know, like distance remote work. So now people like meet on Zoom, you know, or MS Teams, you know, to have like the social banter, or also normally like, you know, your team meetings and as well. Yeah, but also of course with your friends, right? So they are now
virtual friends.
yeah virtual friends, but
like
you know, having like virtual dinners together with your friends, or like people are also like more reaching out to their family at home, or, you know, to their friends to check on them. So you kind of have that reconnection again, which is like really amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Just let's zoom out for a minute and just talk about what is information systems, because I'm sure a lot of people, they may have heard the term, but what does it actually come down to?
Yeah, it's not very commonly known. Like what it, you know, what it compromises really like all the technical components, like hardware and software, and that uses data, you know, to collect, retrieve, store, process in order to make decisions, to use it for collaboration, for coordination. Yeah, it's pretty much data input, processing, information output, so to say.
So it's pretty much everything tech, is that right? And how it influences our lives and work life and social life. Is that everything?
Yeah,
or
it is.
directly?
It is deeply embedded, like in our professional and private life nowadays, right? So there's very few we don't do without technology anymore.
Yeah. So how can that tech be leveraged for the situation we have, which is a pandemic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, what we see right now is a huge acceleration of digitalization, right? I always say digitalization on steroids, kind of, because everyone kind of had, you know, some companies were still paper-based. Some companies were kind of at the beginning of the digitalization journey, and now everyone just has to operate in a digital environment, right? So
yeah, my friend the other day, he called it boomers to zoomers. I
that's
thought it was quite
awesome.
a good term. Yeah.
That is really cool. Yeah, totally. And it is actually a huge opportunity for businesses. But I mean, what we also see, you know, how we come out of this crisis, or you know, post lockdown, we then also see which companies can actually reinvent themselves, and which companies actually can manage that jump, and, you know, other companies can't, so to say. But it is a great opportunity and a step forward, so to say.
And are you seeing certain businesses, I guess everyone has to adapt in their own way, but are certain businesses coming out on top depending on their thinking around how they use technology? Or it's sort of up to the leadership team and the management group to make sure that those steps are taken in place? There's no one particular industry that you see is doing better than others.
Yeah, I mean, so companies that either like sell digital products or services, of course, they have a huge like advantage, but also companies that can, move their processes in the digital environment, of course, they also have an advantage. But then, of course, it is leadership has a big role and plays a big role, but then also the employees have to pull through it, right? So they actually have to, jump on the bandwagon as well or come up with innovative ideas, but then it's on leadership to accept these ideas as well. And then what is really important, like, especially for managers at the moment, because like, it was just such an unprecedented shift, right, to this remote work. So I think at the moment we are all kind of still on that learning journey, how to actually work remotely, because remote work is a skill, right? So, and not a lot of people of us like have that skill already. So we are just, learning and adapting how to actually work in a remote environment. And it's particularly important for managers to kind of support their employees at the moment, kind of how to deal with these daily challenges now, especially for families, right? Like, how do you actually now like juggle your role as a mom or as a dad, and then also as an employee, how to develop that new work routine, but then also, how to actually lead digital meetings, things like this. So everyone is still on the learning journey.
Yeah, and like everyone talks about the pros of digitalization and how it's changing the world and the way we work, and it's very advantageous with what's going on, obviously, when we can't come into contact with each other. But what are the negative implications of all of this?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is also what we've seen in the study. I mean, Zoom meetings and team meetings, they're, good, and it's a good substitute like for physical meetings, but they're particularly like energy draining, because you constantly, you have to like see so many faces, so many gestures. Like, it's just much more energy draining than physical meetings. And also, it's somehow unnatural because you don't have that. So one person speaks and everyone listens, and you don't have that natural interaction anymore, or like this kind of going out into like subgroups. You really have to all listen to one person. Okay, when is my turn to speak? So this is kind of all still challenging.
It might be quite good. It puts people in their place a little bit and makes sure everyone's listening to one person.
Yeah, totally. But then, it's also, if you've got your 8th virtual meeting, at 4:00 in the afternoon, you're exhausted, right? So sure. It's then also really difficult to kind of keep the attention and keep everyone engaged. So that is quite a challenge. And especially like now being in the bubble, right? Like, you have so many distractions, right? So you're not, at work you have like your work environment, whereas at home you have your work, you have everything. You should do the laundry, right?
Kids.
Yeah. Oh, kids running around, right? So there are just so many different distractions, or distractions from the virtual as well, like all the time popping up notifications because some people are bored, so they don't want to chat, but you actually have to start focus on your work. So you've got heaps and heaps of distractions, which you kind of have to blend out and really try to work in a focused way.
Yeah. I want to touch slightly on social media, because it's a bit of a wild west. Everyone can say what they want in there. There's a bit of fake news and fake science just to confuse the whole situation. Is it a net positive thing or a net negative thing for the way we interact, do you think? And what's the thinking behind it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think there's so much inconsistency, right? And I mean, social media use per se is not bad, right? So there are different usage of social media. So you've got that social use where you interact with your friends, where you use it to establish and maintain social relationships. Like, for example, on WhatsApp, where you really interact like with your family and friends. But then you also have that hedonic use, right, where you just use it like for entertainment, for watching 10 million pet videos a day and stuff like this, or for cognitive use, where you have it for share information, share content, engage in a discussion, right? So this is often what happens on LinkedIn. And social and cognitive use are actually positively correlated with performance, whereas hedonic use has a negative impact on performance. So the bottom line is that social media use per se is not good or bad. It's just how we use it for our purposes.
It's just a tool, right?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, technology in general, right? Technology is neither bad or good. The technology is completely neutral. It's just the way we use it that shows the effects. And it's also, there's a lot of talk around like technology addiction and everything. But the end of the day, it depends on who is in control, right? So is your smartphone, for example, controlling you so that, as soon as a notification pops up, you have to look, right? Who is texting me? Or are you in control of your smartphone, right? So that you actually use it as a productivity booster. So it's totally on us how we use technology, not on technology as a devil, so to say.
Yeah, I know that you've done a little bit of research into digital detox and just removing technology from your life altogether. What's the effects of that if you spend like 2 weeks away from technology? What happens to the people?
Yeah, good question. So we used that in a traveling context, right? So we asked our participants to be at least 1 or 2 days disconnected during their journey. And that was quite an interesting experiment because at the beginning, a lot of people were like, oh my God, I can't really travel without my phone. And how should I navigate? How should I find like hostels to stay? How should I find restaurants to eat in? What if my colleagues want to reach me? What if my friends and family wants to get in touch? So there are a lot of like worries and anxiety before the experiment, and also like the first couple of hours or the first day where they were really anxious and frustrated and, oh my God, I don't even know how to get to my hostel. Or, okay, now I'm completely lost. I don't know where I am. How should I, ever find back to the train station, things like this.
So these people were going on international travel, is that right?
Yeah. And we had a complete mix. Like some people went to Cuba, some went to Tonga, some, in Europe, in Australia.
Oh, wow.
So all over the world, really. So we had a really good sample out of like, the urban context or the rural context, all kinds of, it was mainly our generation, but then also, female, male, like, complete mixed sample.
How big was the cohort?
23.
Oh, wow. And they just got sent all around the world from New Zealand?
No. They were also from all around the world. So,
That's
it was
cool.
complete international.
And then how did they handle it?
Yeah, and it was just so cool to see because some people also embraced it right from the beginning, right? So they said, okay, that's cool. Now I'm disconnected. Now I'm kind of in adventure mode. And they just rolled with it. With others, they kind of felt this anxiety at the beginning. But then it was kind of like a, moment for like kind of to disconnect in order to reconnect with the environment. So they now started, talking to locals again, right? So because beforehand they were like, no, I don't want to ask anyone. This is kind of weird. But then they, approached locals and had really nice chats and got like really top secret tips, like where to go, or they can, they kind of, how when you use Google Maps, you literally just stare at the dot on your phone and just kind of trying to follow the dot. Whereas now they kind of looked up and really looked like for landmarks. Yeah. So they had really good experiences just from this whole disconnection experience.
I mean, back in the day, people used to travel and they used to love it as well, with people they had smartphones and all the rest of it. So it's pretty cool just going on an adventure and just trying to disconnect and see what happens.
I think what has changed is, because now we're just so used to it, like we are just so used to the convenience to have like, internet connection just everywhere. So we kind of we have lost a lot of skills, and now during the experience, they kind of regained the skills, like navigation skills, kind of social skills, kind of confidence to talk to strangers, things like that. So that was amazing to see. And also, because now the world expects us to be connected. So now our colleagues, our friends and family, they just, expect us to be responsive within 24 hours, right? So a lot of the concerns there was, what if someone wants to get in touch with me, or I have to let my family and friends know that I'm safe, things like this. So nowadays we have this constant expectation to actually be available and responsive no matter where we are. And that puts actually quite a lot of pressure on us as well.
Yeah. I think it's given us more opportunities than ever before. But like you say, we're always plugged into the matrix. It doesn't matter where we are, doesn't matter the time of day. If we get an email, we know it's there on our mind. Even if you read it 9 p.m. at night, it sort of gives you a little anxious feeling that you've got to answer it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's hard to switch off nowadays.
Yeah. I want to jump into this really interesting area of chatbots and what's going on there, because it's first of all, for people that don't know what chatbots are, give a quick explanation of what it is.
So chatbots are kind of like systems that imitate human interaction. So you see that, like, when you visit a website, there's like a pop-up window, right? And say like, hi, here's Jason. How can I help you, right? So
welcome to the Daily Jase.
Yeah. Welcome to the Daily Jase, yeah.
How are you doing? How can I help?
Yeah, exactly. And these systems operate on natural language processing. So when a user types in a question, so for example, how's the weather today, right? So then the system picks up this intent, how we call it, and transform, with the natural language processing, and then tries to understand, okay, what is the user actually after, right? Okay, so it is about weather. Okay, so then it picks up, okay, perhaps I should report back the weather of today, for example. And this is how it works.
Yeah, and so do you think that it's a good thing that we're moving to chatbots? Because I know that there's a lot of thinking out there that it's not to be trusted, or it's working against us, or it's putting people out of jobs. That's a big one. What does the research say? What's happening in the background?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's kind of at the general discourse, right? Like the robots take over and things like this, right? But actually no, like it's just, I mean, companies implement it to increase like their scale in terms of customer service, and also to reduce cost in the sense, right? But also, so especially in 2018, there was like this huge, hype around chatbots, right? So everyone jumped on the bandwagon and implemented their little chatbot on their website. But I think what a lot of companies fail to recognize that it's very different to traditional technology, right? So if you implement a new information system, you implement, like, for example, a new customer relationship management system, and that's it, right? So you implement it, train your employees, and you're over it. Whereas for chatbot, it's actually the implementation is just the beginning of your project, right? So what a lot of companies got wrong is that they implemented the chatbot and then thought, okay, that's the end of the project. So they didn't actually continue anymore. But what is really crucial, especially with conversational agents, that you then start training the system. So you then have to closely monitor, okay, what are people actually asking for questions, right? So what are their intents? And then you have to see, okay, can the chatbot actually answer that? Why not? And then you see, okay, perhaps it didn't understand the intent, or perhaps we don't have that information in our knowledge base. So you constantly have to train your chatbot in order to have a successful project.
And I suppose just going along the thinking that it might replace jobs, and how can people upskill themselves, not just talking about chatbots here, but also heading into the area of AI and going down that route? How can people upskill themselves so that they can figure out what's needed for employers? How can they become useful in the future, I suppose?
Yeah, totally. That's an interesting point. I'm also running another project around robotic process automation. So where you actually have software bots that execute like tasks like data transfer, like all these kind of swivel chair tasks where you usually had like a human operator and transfer data from one system to another system. So this is now done more and more so through software robots. And there we've seen actually that people, of course it reduces like the workload for the human employees and also their labor hours. But they went on and became like really innovative in terms of, okay, what should they focus on now, right? So they took on new tasks, they took on new responsibilities, but they also increasingly became much more customer focused, right? So while before the RPA implementation, they did a lot of like back office work and did a lot of administrative stuff in these things, and the customer requests came in and they processed the request, right? So now they have much more time on their hand and can be much more proactive, right? So they can analyze like the customer base and then reach out, hey, I think that fund would be really suitable. So their whole task became much more customer facing. So to answer your questions, okay, what skills should people actually focus on? We are much more moving into like the social skills area, right? So the robots are not good yet, right? So it's all about communication, negotiation, all empathy related tasks. So for example, if you're in a financial difficult situation, you don't really want to talk to a robot, right? You want to talk to a person with real empathy. So this is kind of the skill set, like all this innovative thinking, critical thinking, all tasks that require real human judgment. Like, this will remain for humans for quite a while. Like robots can't do that yet.
Do you think we'll reach the point where they can? And if so, how soon?
Yeah, good question. So at the moment, they're rather... so there's this concept out of like hybrid intelligence. I think that's where we are moving towards. And this is kind of that either AI nor humans are good on their own, but they kind of have to combine their forces to achieve like superior performance. And I think this is also what we see more, that AI will support humans much more, especially like with decision making and big data analysis, things like this, so that we can actually improve our performance per se. When robots will be able to take over all the skills that I mentioned previously, like, I'm not sure, but I mean, at the moment there's this, you kind of can program like empathy and personality into conversational agents already, but I mean, this is puppet empathy, right? So this is like it's not real, right? So it's kind of,
to an extent, like everything you program into a robot will be like you say, puppet empathy. It's not, it will never be real, but we can get to the point where it feels real. And it's all about perception. It's not about whether it's real or not, right?
Yeah. And you raise a really interesting point, right? I mean, this is what we call anthropomorphism, right? So it's our kind of ability or tendency to associate human capabilities to non-human entities, like for example technologies, right? Or like I don't know, like your vacuum cleaner, right? So if your vacuum cleaner falls over, you're like, oh shoot, so you kind of have that we have that anthropomorphic tendency. And then also when especially conversation agents that show that kind of personality in terms of that they make some jokes, or that they say, oh, how are you doing today, oh, I had a really bad day, oh, I'm really sorry, to hear that. This is kind of a incident of, okay, I'm showing some puppet empathy, so to say. But then it's on us as humans to recognize that, right? To say, oh yeah, like this, CA is actually caring about me. But what I wanted to say, this anthropomorphism is so important to take in mind, and also for the designers, it's particularly important when they actually, use these social cues, what effects that has on the human users. But it is particularly interesting, like in the whole mental health sector, where there are chatbots that actually could or can support people with mental health diseases. For example, there's a chatbot called WeBot that, where people can chat to, whenever they want, right? When they feel bad, when they had a panic attack. And this is really powerful because they can also use it like at night, for example, when they have a panic attack at night, right? So they can't really call up someone, but they can chat with the chatbot, right? And the chatbot can then give them like some breathing exercises or calm them down in a sense. So they're really, really powerful and really good use cases of CAs as well.
Yeah, is there a way you can tell whether you're talking to a human or not in a lot of these cases? Like, is there I guess the technology needs to catch up to the point that we can't tell the difference between a human and a bot, but is there some quick fire ways you can definitely figure out whether you are or not?
I think you can break them so easily still, right? So yeah, you just play around and ask them random questions, kind of outside their knowledge areas. For example, if you chat to a chatbot in the insurance sector, right? So then you just ask questions, hey, how's the weather like today? Like totally out of context, right? Which a human could answer, but if a robot is not trained in that, then it can't. So you just switch context because, CAs can't switch context easily. And this is how you figure out if it's a chatbot or a human.
Yeah. Try and break the system.
If it's a human though,
they might give you some interesting answers or might be
totally
confused on the other end.
yeah. Like I've heard some stories as well where they thought it's a chatbot, it's actually a human. So some funny incidents as well.
Is there research out there to say how accurate, like we can the user can tell whether it's a chatbot or a human?
So they're kind of like specific design principles where you can actually imitate the human interaction much more. For example, some chatbots have this, kind of artificial delay, right? So as a human would type, for example, or this all social cues like like a human greeting,
like, hey, how are you going?
Yeah, exactly. So there are certain design principles where you can imitate human interactions quite well.
Yeah, we're quite predictable as humans, right?
Well, that's the thing. Like, we are, but we are not. Like, so because this is also the reason why a lot of conversational agents also break, right? Because the natural language is just so diverse, so it's really, really difficult to predict, right? So it's also really difficult for technology to predict and to interpret what is the user actually saying. So this is what we've seen at the beginning, that a lot of times the chatbots broke quite a lot because they didn't understand the intent, right? Because everyone says differently, okay, how do I get to the airport? I want to get to the airport. My flight is,
directions to the airport.
Yeah. So exactly. So it's just so many different ways how you can ask a question, and this is really difficult for a chatbot. Nowadays, the technology has improved considerably.
Yeah. I want to move sideways slightly to talk about what's happening in the world at the moment with coronavirus and how countries are going into lockdown, people are working remotely. Do you think that in 3 years' time, we'll have more people working remotely, or people will move back to business as usual and go back to the office and have those meetings face to face? because there's advantages and disadvantages to both, right?
Yeah. No, I think there will be like a more permanent shift. And in fact, there's a study out there. Wow. Where they say, I think 75% of all participants in that study think that they will, at least 5% of their workforce will remain remote. And I think
so it was a study of employers.
No, it was of CFOs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they answered the question, okay, how much of your workforce do you think will remain remote? And I think 17% even said like, at least 20%. So that is quite a considerable shift. Yeah. But like that's just, kind of like one insight of a study as of now. But I think before the lockdown, I think there wasn't really that trust that it could work, that everyone works remotely. But now, because we had that enforced remote work, now people and employees actually see, hey, it actually works, right? And there are a lot of benefits to remote work, right? Not just for the employees, because they have much more flexibility, right? They can save heaps and heaps of cost on, commute, heaps and heaps of time on their commute. But also, like really caring for their family, but then also working. So it has a lot of advantages for employees, but also for employers, right? So they, could reduce their office space, for example. And it is possible to lead a remote workforce. So I think it's what we see now is kind of an eye-opener and an acceleration for a new way of working in the future.
Yeah, and I suppose that opens up those conversations that may not have been able to be held before. Like employees might be able to challenge their employers. Look, I can do this work at home. This is the systems that we could come up with. Is this something that's reasonable?
Yeah, I think what's at the moment, because it happens so fast, right? So a lot of employees don't really have the technical infrastructure yet that they would need. So they kind of, you see all these like improvisation workplaces, right? Where they have like their laptop, on an ironing board and things like this. Yeah. So whereas at work they have, their two screens and like a nice setup. So I think, if we then move into like permanent remote, I think we definitely have to stock up on the infrastructure at home. But otherwise, and now, now it's the perfect learning experience, right? So now it's the time to upskill on remote work.
Yeah, for sure. I think the tools are definitely out there, right? It just takes an event such as this to change the world. There's a lot going on in New Zealand, a lot going on overseas. Do you think that do you think that business will change how we do it internationally as well as inside our borders, with how we use technology and how, I guess, you can't just commute to Australia for a couple of days anymore because you've got to have this quarantine period. You can't set up an office in some countries now because they've shut their borders. Those types of thinking. How will that influence technology and how it's used in the business setting internationally?
Yeah, very good point. I think, at the moment we're kind of, still in the learning phase and still, okay, how do we actually figure that out, right? If we have, affiliations like abroad and, how do we visit our international clients, things like this, right? And so now we jump into, okay, no, it actually works with having Zoom calls or with having Teams, but then, especially with the crucial, which in the crucial phases of a project, right, with closing a contract and things like this, right, where it would have been actually really important to have this like physical contact, see, okay, what is the culture in their office, what is their environment, how they're working, how do their processes look like, things like this. this will be still a challenge to, try to build that trust to a new client through digital channels, right? Yeah.
Do you think they'll force people to work internally within their countries more?
Well, it depends, right? So it depends how quickly we come up with the medication, right? How effectively we can treat the disease with, and then also how quickly we can come up with the vaccine. So a lot of what's going to happen in the business environment will depend on the developments in science, right? So how quickly they can come up. So we first have to solve like the whole medical situation, and the speed of that will affect, okay, how will it actually change how we do business in the long term.
Yeah. Has there been many tech innovations to help that health process along that you've heard about?
I think there is a lot of, I think they leverage AI a lot as well in terms of vaccine development.
Oh, okay. What does that look like?
So there is a lot, going on. How can we leverage technology now, in all kinds of ways. So, vaccine development, medication development, and then how we can protect, frontline workers. So, in all kind of aspects, we kind of reach out and try to find also like a technical solution.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing how technology can hit all different industries, right? You're a university lecturer. How's that influenced what you've been doing at the university?
Yeah, we've been on a quite interesting journey as well, right? Because the education sector, I think for us, it's also a great opportunity to kind of reinvent ourselves and, think about, how we offer the courses, right? How we interact with our students, how we, teach our materials. So now we move from a complete in-class setting to a complete online setting, right? And for us, it's really important to still establish that interactivity, right? Because like everyone can, record the lectures and put online, but you actually have to achieve like that interactivity so that you still keep your students engaged, and also that you open up ways, how can they ask questions now? How can they work collaboratively? Things like this. So for us in the education sector, it's also kind of the acceleration to digitalization, and we are working hard on getting that sorted now.
Yeah, has it been much of a challenge? Like, in terms of, has it been a jump per se from what you were doing, say, last year? I know that a lot of lectures are recorded automatically. So was there a major shift, or just there was just a little bit of tweaking to that infrastructure?
Yeah, it is actually quite a major shift because at AUT we were recording our lectures right from the start, because we had also international students in China who weren't allowed to come back in New Zealand, right, due to the travel ban. Wow. So we had right from the start we had that we had overseas students, so we kind of had that mixed audience already. But this was pretty much just recording our in-class lectures, whereas now we have to develop online lectures, which is a very, very different concept. So now we've moved from having lectures recorded for 1.5 hours to having snippets of 6 to 8 minutes. So now we kind of, because it's difficult, right? You kind of have to take the attention span of the students into consideration. And everything more than 10 minutes, it's kind of difficult to stay focused in the online environment. So we kind of have to reconceptualize, okay, how do we actually create these 8 to 10 minutes videos? What content do we provide? How do we provide the content? It's a total redesign, and also a total redesign of the assessments.
Yeah, I know a few of my friends, now that everything's gone digital, they can watch recordings and then they can watch things on double time, so that it makes their time more efficient. So there's some, and they can watch it whenever they want. So there's some
So
advantages to both sides, right?
Yeah, totally. And also for international students, right? So some of them went home, right, before the lockdown to be with their families. And they can watch now the videos whenever they want. So and they still can. So what I have, like, I also have like a forum discussion. They can also ask their questions, whenever they want. So it's a great advantage, actually. And I mean, what's also important, in the lecture, like you hear the content once, right? Whereas this online lecture, if you haven't understood it, you just watch the video again. So
yeah. Watch it on repeat till it's in your brain.
Yeah, 24/7.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting world we're heading into. This new normal, as everyone is calling it. Any last thoughts on what this, as we wrap up, any last thoughts on what this means in 6 months, I guess, on a regional level, national level, and global level, in terms of technology and information systems?
I think, like, especially in New Zealand, I think we are very, very fortunate to have such a good leader, right? So who was really firm, but also super caring for the nation. And so I think we have quite a big advantage because our general health is quite good. Like, we don't have too many cases. The healthcare system is really good. So as soon as the lockdown is over, I think they're gonna start slowly up, rolling out the economy again, like really step by step. So and then, as I said, the economic situation really depends on the health situation, so how quickly they come up with the medication and vaccines. But I think for us immediately, I think I think we just have to kind of first and foremost, of course, have the disease under control, and then very, very slowly turn on the economy again. And then also, because I mean, the industry that it hits the hardest is is tourism and travel, right? So then, we that industry has to reinvent themselves completely, like, pushing more into like national tourism, things like this. And then it depends how quickly the borders will open.
It's a very complex situation, and like you say, we're putting the health risk at the forefront at the moment, but they'll come with an economic challenge in the future that we've got to tackle, and businesses will reinvent themselves. Like you say, tourism is moving more towards working internally within New Zealand and within their own country. So it'll just be interesting to see how it all unfolds.
Yeah, totally.
Lena, thank you so much for coming on. You're amazing, a very intelligent woman. It's been an awesome time bringing you onto the Daily Jase live show. If you ever need anything, shout out. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch? On LinkedIn? Is that the best way?
Yeah, I'm mainly on LinkedIn. Yeah, definitely. On Facebook as well, but honestly, mainly on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. There you are on LinkedIn. Have a great day. I know that you're a very busy woman, got interviews and lectures all over the place. So I'll let you get on with it. But thank you so much for coming on. If you ever need anything, get in touch, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Jase. It was awesome.
Cool.
Thank you.
Awesome.
See ya.